Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi Podcast. Together we dive into the world of sci-fi and science fiction. From episodes of Star Trek, Star Wars, to The Walking Dead, Resident Evil, all the hot new science fiction movies from the back doors of Marvel or DC. The Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi Podcast. You'll never look at science fiction the same way again.
Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Sci-Fi Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Alex. Today, I want to talk to you guys about episode 3 of The Boys. This episode is called Get Some, but first and foremost, may the 4th be with you, everyone. Today is also my cat's birthday, so this is a most auspicious of holidays for me, and both being Star Wars Day and the birth of my firstborn little bear. But today we are going to talk about The Boys. So in our previous episode, we discussed episodes 1 and 2 of The Boys, and where we left off is that Starlight was saving a girl who someone was attempting to sexually assault. And they caught video of her beating these guys up on closed circuit television. And so there wasn't any evidence of the girl having been there. So it was going into kind of a PR nightmare at that point. And she was effectively benched and was having meetings with legal and everyone else scheduled for her for the next day. However, as episode 3 starts, she walks into this meeting with her bosses, Madeline Stillwell and Ashley, the PR/marketing woman, and there are 3 other people in there that we haven't seen before. But it turns out that instead of it being a meeting with HR and PR and legal, that it's really a meeting with marketing, because the girl who had been attacked saw the video on YouTube and came forward. So it turns her PR nightmare effectively into a heyday. So they are telling her this narrative that they would like to spin going forward and really leaning into the feminist perspective. And then they tell her that they want her to show a lot of skin. So her current outfit that she's been wearing up to this point covers her upper torso completely. There's also a skirt component and some boots and everything. And I believe she also has a cape. It's very modest in the way that the dress is structured. But this new costume is very revealing. So it shows a ton of cleavage. I'm talking like mid-abdomen cleavage. You guys, it goes down deep. I don't know what kind of special body glue or tape they were wanting to use to hold her in while she fights crime, but here we are. So they're having her put this on, and it looks almost like a swimsuit in its cut as well. So her thighs and everything are going to be out. And this is really uncomfortable for Starlight. We have learned that she's really more religious in her initial upbringing, and that this is kind of a lot for her. She's very demure in many ways. So she tells them that she doesn't want to do that. She'd like to keep her old costume, and they essentially give her an ultimatum. They're like, get with the program and comply, or you're out of the 7. You can wear your old costume, but you won't be in the 7. Is more or less what Madeline tells her. So a big theme that jumped out of me in episode 3 of the show is that fame and crappy jobs steal pieces of you bit by bit. by forcing you to compromise who you are, your ideals, your values, your integrity, until you no longer recognize yourself. And the first time that Starlight encountered this, it was when the Deep sexually assaulted her by forcing her to perform oral sex on him, by threatening to get her kicked out of her brand new dream job. But this is a different type of betrayal, as now this meeting, which is also women-led, they've really turned on her, and in the same breath, they tell her they want her to be the face of feminism for Vought and for their brand. They are trying to force her arm into going ahead and just complying, which isn't very feminist at all. They don't care about her consent. They don't care about how she feels about what she would be wearing or the message it might portray to other fans. And it makes her very uncomfortable. It's further compromising her comfort with her own body, which has recently been violated, and her own image. So this is a really tough time for Starlight. And I think that she's supposed to be about 22, 23 is what they've established on the show. So she's really young and is really coming into this fame and this dream, this lifelong dream that she has really early. And so this is some of her first job experiences as far as we can tell. We also learn at a certain point that her first kiss was when she was 18 at her senior prom. She's not ultimately incredibly experienced with the world around her, even if she is physically strong and capable of beating up any human who is not superpowered. And she may very well be able to take on many of the heroes who are superpowered. So this is just a lot for Starlight. And I find that it's really relatable as a portion of the hero's journey. Because Starlight isn't the only one who is getting pressured to change bit by bit. Huey is also going through these experiences of these changes with like Robin and having to act like he is going to sign over the NDA and his right to even talk about this horrible thing that happened to Robin for the sake of trying to get one over on the Seven and hold A-Train accountable, really. And then Translucent tries to kill him and he finds himself panicking and going to dispose of the body with Butcher. And then he finds himself in an additional deep situation. It just continues escalating in these little bits. It's like death by 1,000 paper cuts. And we can see what happens at the end of the line when we see interactions with Queen Maeve. And how she just appears really ambivalent and unaffected by most things around her. Because she's been in this game for so long that she has gone ahead and given up those pieces bit by bit. If the pieces were requested of them wholesale, then that may not be something that people would actively go for. But it's this bit by bit that is ultimately what leads to you compromising who you are as a person. And we can see that in different characters to differing degrees. It also resonates with me for my own personal life. So I've previously left a job that forced me to compromise pieces of who I was in the way that they structured their policies and procedures. Until it finally got to the point where they were asking me to compromise my personal integrity. And it tore me up, you guys. So I talked to some of my buddies who used to work for that company, and some who also still did at the time. And one of them told me that this is not the first time they've asked you to compromise your integrity or do something that goes against your values, and it won't be the last. This is just the most startling example of it. And that really contextualized it for me. I am a person who has always had big plans and backup plans and everything, but it led to me ultimately quitting my job. I talked to our VP, and he was very serious about continuing with that course of action, even with all of the issues that I brought up with it. And ultimately, I went ahead and put in a 4-week notice to get my PTO paid out and went ahead and left that company. It had already taken pieces of me by that point that I had forfeited myself, essentially as a condition of employment. And that is what Starlight is really going through with right here. And that's what Huey is experiencing in his own personal vendetta against A-Train. It's not really his job, but Huey actually quits his paying job to pursue this new career with Butcher and dedicating his life to holding supers accountable. So in that way, this really resonated with me, and I really enjoyed this perspective. I didn't expect them to take on workplace issues, and it was rather refreshing. We're going to go on a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about what happens when Huey and the others clean up the mess of Translucent. Stay tuned. You really can't underestimate the importance of having the right creative work for your brand or your product. Whether it's a logo, a website, a book cover, or an ad campaign, you really need a quality design to make that big difference pop and deliver your overall engagement and success in a competitive market. That's where Design Crowd comes in. Design Crowd has over 750,000 designers from Sydney to San Francisco ready to help you with awesome creative ideas. They make crowdsourcing work for you. So if you need a logo or you're working on your creative branding, you can go to designcrowd.com and post a brief describing the design you need. And then within about 2 to 7 days, you'll receive up to over 100 different designs from designers around the world. Then you pick the best design and approve payment to the designer. So you're only paying for the design that you want. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of freelancing and out of crowdsourcing. And you don't have to be a huge company like Harvard Business School to use Design Crowd, although they have used it as well. You can start a project on Design Crowd for as little as $99. And if you go right now to designcrowd.com/health and wellness or enter the promo code health and wellness on their website, then our health and wellness listeners will receive up to $150 off of your design project. That's designcrowd.com/health and wellness or entering that promo code health and wellness.
Want to find out what movies to go see? Then check out the GSMC Movie Podcast. It's your ticket to the latest movies, whether it's a new blockbuster event, romantic, comedy, or action flick. This show has got it all covered. They talk some what to go see now, don't bother, what's hot on Netflix, and everything in between. That's GSMCpodcast.com/movie-podcast. When it's all about the movies, it has to be this new show. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about workplace issues as found in The Boys and how it's partly about how fame and crappy jobs can steal pieces of you a little at a time until you no longer recognize yourself due to how much you have compromised at the base level of who you are and what you believe. It's very much relatable, even in Starlight being as famous as she is. It's a real workplace issue that we see in the day-to-day, and they've just satirized it, which is what the show is about. It is a satirical indictment of corporations and politicians and fame and celebrity in America. And they have dealt with it brilliantly in a way that reminds me of Watchmen in many ways. So at this point in the story, Huey is cleaning up all of the blood and gore from where they have exploded translucent. Or rather, Huey has washed off his face, washed the gore off of himself, and put on a chef's coat that they've given him, while Butcher and Frenchie are cleaning up the mess. And they seem really chill about it. It's super domestic how they're cleaning up all of this blood and gore. And they exploded a man from the inside out. So there's a lot of blood and gore absolutely everywhere. Huey kind of starts losing it though. And he wants to go home and get his own clothes. And he's very clearly in shock from what's just happened. And Butcher's like, no, you don't need to go anywhere. And Huey's like, no, I want my own clothes. And he's just kind of freaking out. So Butcher appoints Frenchie to go with him to the house that he shares with his father. And in this case, Huey's like, no, I don't want a murderer I just met to come home with me. He doesn't even know Frenchie that well. But Butcher's like, you get Frenchie to go with you or I break your legs, pretty much, because he knows that Huey is in a state where he might just spill the beans or do something crazy and perhaps go confess if he's left to his own devices. So he goes home with Frenchie and is very much still on edge in many ways. He is still kind of in shock about what has just happened, and he freaks out when he sees his room decorated in soup stuff, which includes a Funko Pop of A-Train, the soup who killed his girlfriend Robin by bursting through her and going way too fast. So he has a confrontation with his dad ultimately, which is kind of painful to watch because it's so hurtful with his father. Part of it is for Huey to really come into his own. I don't necessarily want to say come of age, because that's usually more associated with being a teenager and stuff. And Huey's a young man, but he is having this confrontation and standing up for himself when he has mostly kept all of his negative feelings pretty close to his vest. Remember that Robin was pushing him to ask for a raise that he very much deserved, but he was afraid to ask for even that which he deserved. Whereas with his father, he is upset because his father has pressured him to take the money that was offered for Robin, but as hush money, really, for her death at the hands of a soup. But also his father is just content to sit there and watch television together every day, to watch Remington Steele with him. And for Huey, it feels like he's living perhaps a half-life, or maybe even a small death or purgatory. And he blows up on his dad and he tells him, I can't just sit here on the couch with you anymore. I can't even tell you like how much I hate Remington Steele and sitting here and just zoning out with you all the time. Huey was essentially doing that because he loved his dad and wanted to spend time with him, but also because he wasn't comfortable enough in using his own voice. So his dad is really hurt by this. This is the first time he has heard any of it, and he really seems like he is blindsided by it. So it's really hard to watch, but it's a very real scene in that way, because we're not always kind to others when they need us to be. When we're upset, we lash out at other people, and this kind of thing is what Butcher was worried about. Don't get me wrong, Butcher does not care about Huey's feelings, or his father's feelings, really. He just cares about any actions that may stem from them. So by Huey acting out of character, even if he doesn't necessarily spill the beans, it can be a red flag. So this is why he sent Frenchie with him. And thankfully, Frenchie goes ahead and goes out with him and tells him this horror story about when he was a kid and how his father had treated him in an attempt to bond. But it is just something that's so stark, really, for Huey, that he is just kind of reeling a little bit, like, what is happening right now? What is the story this guy is telling me? And he seems pretty freaked out, because his father is actually a really kind man. Huey just doesn't enjoy all the things that his father does, whereas Frenchie's family seems to have been quite abusive. So we get at this point to see that Carl Urban's character, Butcher, is going to see an old friend of his who appears to be working in like a juvenile detention center. He calls this friend Mother's Milk. It's his nickname, like Frenchie. Those aren't their actual names. And he is talking to him about how things are going with the hunt for the soups. And you get the sense that they used to work together with Frenchie in trying to hunt down the soups. But these kids in the detention center really seem to respect Mother's Milk as well. And they sometimes call him MM. The kids really listen to him when he draws a line for them and when he is saying, hey, cut it out, no more fighting. He's able to break up fights really easily. And he carries this calm sense of leadership and dominance in many ways. I love all of these characters, you guys. But I really like getting to know them individually as they go on too. So he's sitting here working in juvenile detention. This person clearly cares about other people, is the sense that you get from Mother's Milk. He's not mean or cruel in communicating with these kids. He's just very straightforward in his expectations and doling out punishments in response to the things that they do. And I love how they introduce him in that. We also get to see that Butcher and Mother's Milk had a shared history, and that as soon as Butcher brings up the fact that they have killed Translucent, Mother's Milk is in. He is like, okay, yeah, I'm totally in. How did you do it? I'm morbidly curious. How is something like that even achieved, really? And Butcher walks him all through it. And he's like, okay, well, I'll get involved as long as Frenchie's not involved. And Butcher, of course, being the manipulative jerk that he is, just lies straight to MM's face. And it's like, no, I've not seen that guy in years. I don't know what you're talking about. Just come with me. So I don't know if it's the end of MM's shift or what, but he ends up going ahead and leaving with Butcher to go and meet up with the other two. We're going to go on a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to pick up with Frenchie and Mother's Milk, as well as Homelander. Stay tuned. You really can't underestimate the importance of having the right creative work for your brand or your product. Whether it's a logo, a website, a book cover, or an ad campaign, you really need a quality design to make that big difference pop and deliver your overall engagement and success in a competitive market. That's where Design Crowd comes in. Design Crowd has over 750,000 designers from Sydney to San Francisco ready to help you with awesome creative ideas. They make crowdsourcing work for you. So if you need a logo or you're working on your creative branding, you can go to designcrowd.com and post a brief describing the design you need. And then within about 2 to 7 days, you'll receive up to over 100 different designs from designers around the world. Then you pick the best design and approve payment to the designer. So you're only paying for the design that you want. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of freelancing and out of crowdsourcing. And you don't have to be a huge company like Harvard Business School to use Design Crowd, although they have used it as well. You can start a project on Design Crowd for as little as $99. And if you go right now to designcrowd.com/health and wellness or enter the promo code health and wellness on their website, then our health and wellness listeners will receive up to $150 off of your design project. That's designcrowd.com/health and wellness or entering that promo code health and wellness.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about Butcher's interaction with Mother's Milk and how Huey kind of loses it on his dad while he's at the house with Frenchie. Now we're going to talk a little bit more about Frenchie and MM's beef as well as where Homelander is during this time. Homelander is starting to creep me out a little bit at this point in the show. So he has effectively been referred to as having like a really clean slate, and he doesn't engage in any of the other debauchery that Butcher has really insisted that all soups do. So he's never seen him at any of the soup clubs where they are doing all manner of obscene and lewd things. And he's been harder to track down. But we have seen that when someone tries to blackmail Madeline, Stillwell, their boss, Homelander shoots down the plane with his laser beams in his eyes. So Homelander is not entirely the Captain America, Superman type character that we have been led to believe he is thus far. And at this point, he also gets really upset with Madeline and is clearly jealous of the baby that she has, which is incredibly unsettling the way that this is portrayed. Now that said, the actor does a fantastic job at getting across this feeling of jealousy just by the looks in his eyes and such, and in his tone. So he's feeling like he's not getting enough attention from Madeline because she has this newborn baby now. And he is being very weird about it. The sense of the type of relationship that he has with Madeline is kind of morphing as the story goes on further. So at sometimes she seems to be treating him like he's her child, and other times like he's an employee and she's placating him, but she also seems to be kind of scared of him too. And the relationship almost seems a little sexual without quite going into sexual territory at first. But that's where we are, with getting a better sense of Homelander and his relationship with his boss, Madeline Stillwell. So now we also have Frenchie and Mother's Milk meeting up in what appears to be the back of a truck. And they very clearly have some old beef about someone named Mallory's family. But they don't quite go into it just yet. They are about to really rip each other's heads off, though, and are ready for a good fist fight, with Butcher in between trying to calm them down, when Mother's Milk gets a phone call from his lady, Monique. And so he takes a pause and is very sweet and stuff to her, and seems like he's a really good boyfriend, actually. And they kind of make fun of him for it, but he's like, hey, I love my lady. That's the way it is. So it is really nice and wholesome, and it reminds me again of Santa Clarita Diet, where they say people can be more than one thing, Joel. So that is very present in this show a lot. So they can be more than one thing. Huey is both a good person and now also a murderer. And Starlight is simultaneously someone who is very kind and sweet, but also caving a bit under pressure. She's very strong, but this personal and social pressure is really getting to her, and she's not truly been able to speak with anyone except for Huey about it at this point. And you can see that it is weighing on her very much in a heavy is the head that wears the crown type of way. So this is really getting to the point where we're getting to know most of our base characters, and Butcher is explaining what's going on and going, hey, this is Huey, and he keeps surprising us. And Huey does know a lot about the cables and everything because he worked at the AV store. He knows a lot about audio-visual equipment, about the internet, and so on and so forth, and is much younger than the others are. So in the group of the boys, Huey is kind of a wild card. He is really surprising to the rest of the group because they underestimate him. But that's also something that makes Huey pretty valuable as we go along. So the fight is put off because of the call with Monique, and then they decide that they're still mad at each other, but they're going to call it a day. For right now, they're going to table that problem and work on the larger issue at hand. And they decide that one good way to infiltrate A-Train's home and to get more information about A-Train specifically is to start snooping on him in his home that he shares with his girlfriend, who is also a soup named Popclaw. So Popclaw is very strong, just like all other soups. They seem to all be blessed with super strength and then also have something else that's going on with them. They can heal faster and stuff, but also have something that makes them special, like how Homelander can fly and has laser beam eyes and can see through zinc. And Popclaw has those like tusks almost that pop out of her forearms. And A-Train is super fast, and Starlight can convert energy around her into bursts of these bright beams as well that seem to do destructive damage as well as being very bright and possibly blinding people as well. So, they are all kind of figuring out who they are, and this is who Popclaw is. And she has apparently done a lot of movies. She's more of a B-list type of super in this scenario. And that really gives us a better look at soups in general, I think. So there does seem to be a hierarchy here that you don't necessarily see in things like the Justice League. So in the old Justice League cartoons and in the Super Friends, you had characters like the Wonder Twins who could form into any type of precipitation for one, and the other could change into any type of animal. And they would say, Wonder Twins, activate, form of a bucket of water, form of a gorilla. And it was kind of cheesy, but they were still part of the Super Friends with Superman and Wonder Woman and Batman and Aquaman and everything. So they weren't relegated to a B-list, even though in reality, if you had enough supers around, especially enough that you could pool them for a contest to pick a new one on a national level, and that Starlight Annie felt that there were enough people who were eligible that there was no way she was going to get it, you're going to end up with some B-list ones as well. So Pop Claw is just really strong like the rest of them, and then she has these claws in her forearms that pop out. Just like a single claw, which is why I described it as almost looking like a tusk. So it appears that in these cases, sometimes they just do movies. And Pop Claw's movies appear to be rather sexual or perhaps downright pornographic in nature as well. So that is where she is. She's not even just making blockbusters, but you really get a sense that they're pornographic. And I think that that's interesting how they portray it in that way, because that's not something that we tend to see with other shows like Legends of Tomorrow or with the Avengers, where everyone is roughly treated the same. You have people who are in a class with the Scarlet Witch when she is far more powerful than most of them. But you have Scarlet Witch being in the same group with, like, Hawkeye. And I know I'm gonna get some hate for that one. I know Hawkeye, especially when he's Ronin, is a fan favorite. But come on, Scarlet Witch can do chaos magic, and she's also actually a mutant. So I know in the movie they were not able to say that because of the rights to the stories, and they had to label her as an Inhuman for Age of Ultron and everything. But Scarlet Witch is both a witch trained by Agatha Harkness and is also a mutant, the child of Magneto and Magda. And also, of course, her brother Quicksilver. But you guys get my point. Quicksilver is just really fast. Scarlet Witch is where it's at. She is more powerful than most of them. And we see that when she's given it to Thanos in one of the last movies. So in that regard, you have all of these characters with a wide range of powers and abilities, all in this A-team of being the Avengers. And in The Boys, I love that they show how that really just would not happen in an American superhero system. Don't get me wrong, I still love the Avengers. I love Hawkeye too, you guys. And I love the Justice League, and I love Super Friends and everything. But I really like this alternative perspective as well. We're going to go on a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to pick up with how the boys are intending to spy on A-Train and Popclaw, and we're also going to talk about what Queen Maeve and Homelander are up to. Stay tuned.
Watching TV has changed over time. Streaming has become the new norm. That's why Golden State Media Concepts television podcast dives headfirst to the world of cord cutting. Want to be on the loop of what's hot in Netflix? Or if it's not a preference, what about original shows in Hulu? We've got you covered. Join us as we fill in the blank and talk about movies to stream and what show you should be binging. This is the Golden State Media Concepts television podcast.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were discussing Frenchie and Mother's Milk's beef over about someone named Mallory's family and something going awry in a previous op. But we don't go very far into it just yet. we also see that they are getting ready to upgrade A-Train and his girlfriend's internet, or at least pretend to do so, in order to start snooping on A-Train. So as someone who used to work in internet tech support, worked for an internet company as an operations manager as well, at a certain point, you guys, if you're not using your internet for much more than just streaming Netflix, you really don't need 200 megs or anything like that. Those are just going to be crazy high speeds for no real reason at that point. And you're not even going to notice the upgrade. You won't know whether it's faster or not. And for me, having worked in that was really the brilliance of what Huey tells her. Popclaw clearly has no interest or understanding of what he's actually saying to her. She just hears that it's a free upgrade to faster internet. And so she's just like, sweet, give me the free stuff. Come on in here, make my internet better. Even though it's not something that she would likely even notice. So they go about doing some stuff on her computer and also in moving these cables around so that they can really have eyes and ears inside of the apartment and perhaps learn some more about A-Train in this intimate situation or environment where he may be more comfortable divulging stuff and talking to his girlfriend. So they go ahead and get this set up, Mother's Milk and Huey that is, and then they go to leave and they run into A-Train in the hallway coming into his apartment. And it's a very tense moment, you guys, but it turns out that A-Train doesn't remember Huey at all, even though he has now also met Huey face to face to provide him with the apology for Robin's death. The apology that absolutely in no way implied any type of liability, as the lawyer so callously said prior to the handshake between him and A-Train. And this really seems to add a lot of insult to injury for Huey. You can tell that he totally sees red, and he almost blows their entire cover by just standing there and staring at A-Train. And he's like, hey man, do you want an autograph or something? And Huey's like, we've met before. And A-Train's like, oh, I've met a lot of people. I don't really remember you. And since he's already seen A-Train on the footage from the Soup Club laughing about swallowing Robin's molar, this is just getting to be a little much for him. And he recently has that self-esteem boost of infiltrating the Vought 7 building and also having already had a confrontation with A-Train and then subsequently one with Translucent and ultimately killing Translucent. So he almost entirely derails his hero's journey right now in this confrontation with A-Train just out of a sense of rage and pain. So Mother's Milk is just kind of guiding him around him. He's like, okay, we're gonna go now. And he's like, dude, you trying to get us killed? Like, this guy could totally kill us. So Mother's Milk kind of steers him in the right direction and ultimately saves the day. But it's long enough of an interaction that A-Train may remember him in the future because it's such a weird interaction as well. So as the scene ends, we get to see Queen Maeve kicking some men's butts in training. She's going up against about 3 or 4 guys at a time, I think. And we're really getting to see that she has some excellent fighting skills. She's not just really strong, and her character appears to have been modeled on Xena Warrior Princess and Wonder Woman maybe. But she is able to fight very well, is what I'm getting at. Her hand-to-hand combat skills are excellent, and she has a really good eye for precision too. She's in the middle of this training and sparring session when Homelander comes and gives her a phone call that she has to go to stop a mass shooter with him. Or someone in the crime analytics section calls her and tells her to meet him for it. So they show up to stop this mass shooter in downtown, and you get more of a sense of Homelander and Queen Maeve through their interactions with each other. So they're both apparently bulletproof. They're not really worried walking through here that they're going to be harmed in any way by the bullets flying around, because they're just strolling through the area. They're also not seemingly very concerned with how many other people could be getting harmed right now, because they seem to be in no particular hurry. So you see them walking past all these cops and everything, and then Homelander just does a big leap like Superman would do, leaping tall buildings in a single bound, and goes up to one of the top floors. And Queen Maeve ends up having to take the elevator. So he's waiting on her at the top of the building when she finishes going through the elevator. Now, he's very strong. He could have definitely taken her with him, but that's just kind of the jerk that he is and his display of dominance. And she's kind of annoyed with him. And he tells her, that's why I love you, Maeve. You're the only one who tells me the truth. And it's kind of an uncomfortable situation. And you get the sense that they had a relationship before that may have been romantic in nature. And then Homelander and Queen Maeve go in and they stop the guy who's been shooting everyone. And Homelander just viciously rips the guy's heart out for the lulz. He is taking a really unsettling amount of glee out of this interaction. And we see that the plan wasn't actually to kill him. And when they're that superpowered and the bullets don't do anything to them, there's not even really a reason to use deadly force. But again, they have all of the authority and all of this power, and no one is going to call them out on anything like that. No one would even suspect it because they're revered and loved like celebrities who also keep everyone safe. So he rips the guy's heart out, and Queen Maeve is visibly irritated with him. And she tells him pretty much, you ruined my collar. I can't march this guy out on television in front of everyone for the media component with his heart ripped out of his chest. What the heck? And now I can't really walk him out and get the media attention that I needed for this, which was the point of us doing this crossover team up thing. And he's just like, you'll be fine, and is really dismissive of her concerns. And then he says, you know the drill, he shot first, which is a very topical issue in modern day America, especially with the Black Lives Matter movement in regards to police brutality and excessive use of force. So they are really satirizing this hardcore at this point and going, hey, if there were superheroes, it might not just be cops that are doing this. You could have people acting with total impunity at this point. Now, in some ways, some police officers are acting with impunity in this manner, but this is really taking it to an extreme, because how do you even go about stopping someone who could kill most of the people in the city really easily with laser beams in their eyes? So I like that they went there. They had the fortitude to go ahead and take it there. And then we see them falsifying evidence by him shooting her with the automatic weapon while she just stands there. It doesn't even knock her back a little bit because she's so strong. And then she jokingly says, the things I let you do to me. And he huffs some laughter and then says, and we're not even dating anymore. And then she looks really bothered by his comment, but I couldn't quite tell upon first viewing whether she was sad or more upset and unsettled by that comment. We're going to go on a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to get into where A-Train and Popclaw are, as well as what's going on with the race and Mother's Milk and Huey. Stay tuned.
The GSMC Life and Happiness podcast takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible. Download the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were discussing Queen Maeve and Homelander's interactions with each other, as well as the upgrading, or pretending to upgrade, of A-Train and Popclaw's internet to start snooping on him. Now we're going to talk about A-Train and Popclaw some more. So we get back with them and we see from the van where they are monitoring the AV that's in their house, that A-Train and Popclaw are in a fight about something called Compound V, which up until this point I actually thought was a place. And maybe I just really missed the signals for that, but I thought it was a compound as in like a location. But really it turns out to be essentially steroids for superheroes. So it's a compound as in it's a mixture of something. And we find out now that A-Train was on Compound V when he killed Robin by running right through her. That's why he was in such a hurry, and that's why he was acting so weird when he kind of stopped and says, "I can't stop." So it's really a performance-enhancing drug. And it's because A-Train is currently the fastest man in the world, especially since America appears to be the only place with superheroes just now. And he and another fellow who is very fast, named Shockwave, have a race coming up that's going to be televised. And A-Train's really worried about doing well. So he takes Compound V, which you essentially shoot up in a manner similar to heroin. So Popclaw gets upset with him because she's like, I'll still love you even if this guy turns out to be faster. And he's like, yeah, but that doesn't matter because I'll no longer be a part of the Seven and I don't want to be a B-team soup by losing to Shockwave. So I need these drugs. So that hurts her feelings because she's essentially considered a B-team soup. And she's like, really? Like me? And it's really upsetting to understand that type of regard that he has for her. He was also supposed to get permission for them to be publicized as being together. He's supposed to get permission from Madeline Stillwell, and he hasn't yet. So her feelings are double hurt, and she's quite angry at him because she feels like he's keeping her a secret. So then we have Mother's Milk and Huey having a real moment about death. It's a very interesting conversation. And if you guys haven't seen the show yet, I definitely encourage you to watch it. But I'm not going to go into that too far. We're going to move forward instead to Queen Maeve and Homelander doing PR in an interview while Starlight and Black Noir do signings. So we see that Starlight is wearing her new costume, and a guy really upsets her by yelling for her to show her breasts while she's trying to take a photo with a young female fan. And she ends up having to just take a break. Ashley wants her to keep working on this, but she's like, no, I need a break because she's ready to break that guy's face. So she walks off. And then we see Homelander and Queen Maeve talking about why they broke up. And she tells him that she doesn't want to talk about it. And I kind of get a sense that he may have been physically abusive, in addition to him now seeming to slowly be losing his mind. He also refers to the audience as MFers under his breath, you guys. So he actually has no real regard for these people in any way. He seems to truly resent all of the humans who are normal. And on Starlight's way to take her break, she and Huey see each other, and he stops her from going in the locker room right when she's about to walk in on Frenchie sneaking in to search A-Train's gear for the Compound V. Because this is a very big Vought event. So this is Shockwave and A-Train going up against each other, and Queen Maeve and Homelander being interviewed, and Starlight and Black Noir are doing signings. Really, I think the only of the 7 that we don't see here are the Deep and also Translucent, if I recall correctly. So at this point, she almost catches Frenchie by accident because they need to get a hold of that Compound V in order to really prove to Butcher's friend Raina in the CIA, she's the deputy director, that there's some stuff going awry with the 7 and truly take them down. So she lets him, Huey, take her to get nachos and beer. He asks her if he can buy her a beer, and she goes, "Will you throw in nachos?" And it's like, yes, gentlemen, that is exactly the way to a lady's heart, is through her stomach. My fellow ladies already know that, which is why I am specifically addressing non-ladies. Go ahead and offer to buy her chicken wings, you guys, not just a beer. That's what we truly want. Or maybe some cheese sticks. I'm not big on mozzarella sticks, but I digress. So Starlight sits down with Huey and tells her that she's not sure her bosses even want her to save people. And she's really upset about that. She's tried to have conversations with her mother so far and confide these things in her, but she feels that she can't. She stopped herself each time it's gotten to that point. Additionally, she knows she can't talk to the Deep about it and gets the sense from Queen Maeve that not only is Queen Maeve unapproachable about these issues, but rather that she should definitely not be showing any weakness to the men that they work with. We've also seen that she definitely cannot talk to Ashley or Madeline about it. So she feels really stuck, and it makes a lot of sense as to why she's confiding in Huey about it. And he also met her as Annie and refers to her as such, so she feels more comfortable. So as she's telling him that she's not sure her bosses even want her to save people because she got censured for beating those guys up on closed circuit television in an encounter that was not set up for them, it's really bothering her. So she's been in a setup recently where she was forced to be paired with the Deep and go ahead and fight crime that way, only to find that they were filming the entire thing and using it all for photo ops. Also, she did tell off the Deep and informed him that if he ever tried to touch her again, that she would essentially blast him with her superpowers. And it's a very compelling moment. She looks very serious, and I love the way her eyes literally light up because her name is Starlight, and the energy elements around them, like the local lamp lights and stuff, start sparking when this happens. So she's been coming to a lot of realizations and being forced to do things she doesn't want to, but also stepping into her powers in a way. And I mean that in both methods, really, as she is going through this hero's journey. And in this moment, Huey realizes that she was talking on the bench the other day about hating this job of being a superhero. And he tells her that she has nothing to prove. He's like, if you don't want to do this anymore, you don't have to. This is not something that you are backed into a corner on. If you hate it, if it's not what you thought it would be, then by all means quit. By virtue of already having made it into the 7, she has proved that she can. And she doesn't have anything to prove to anyone. She doesn't have to tough this out just because this was her dream. Sometimes our dreams aren't all they're cracked up to be. And Annie really appreciates this perspective from Huey and ends up giving him her number. So now Huey is aware that Annie is Starlight, and that kind of throws a monkey wrench in here because he genuinely likes this girl and she seems to genuinely like him too. But he's trying to take down the entire organization she works for, which is complicated because she does also hate it herself. We're going to go on another break, and when we come back, we are going to talk about where we find Frenchie and Popclaw.
The Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast, the show that gives you advice on everything travel. We explore places you've always wanted to go, as well as giving tips for traveling in those places. We'll give you advice on the best sites for travel tips, information, and discounts. Join us as we travel the world, explore cultures, and meet new people. The Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast has got you covered. Download the GSMC Travel Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about Starlight and Huey's conversation at the Shockwave versus A-Train race event, and we were also talking about where Homelander and Queen Maeve are teaching us more about their relationship with each other and who they are individually as people. So now we are at the point where Frenchie is inside of the locker room of this large event, but he cannot find the compound V anywhere. He can't even find the leftover vial because A-Train has already taken it and disposed of the vial and the materials to inject it elsewhere. And it looks like the event is about to happen. And A-Train's brother is there and has been helping him train to go faster. And he really sees that he's on the Compound V, and he's not happy about that because it's a performance-enhancing drug, and it also, in the manner of many performance-enhancing drugs, can be really dangerous to an individual's body. So Mother's Milk is standing there in the crowd in separate areas from the others, and he sees that A-Train's girlfriend is on the cell phone footage, or the cell phone display that is connected to the AV spy cam that they were on, and is about to use some type of drug on the surveillance video. So he dips out to go and check on her. And you can't quite tell first whether he just really cares about people, because you get the sense that he does, and that that's why he was working in juvie. But he also really calls on that experience to recognize that she is likely to use drugs again, and that they'll be able to find that Compound V and source it for their CIA mission. So he heads out once he recognizes her drug kit in the video and goes to watch. And we see Popclaw in their apartment, hers and A-Train's, reaching for the Compound V and then tying it off and injecting it. And she does this in a rage because she saw A-Train say in the press junket, the interview for the race, that he was single in that post-race press conference. She's really not happy about that. You can tell that she's not just angry, but she's really hurt because not only did he tell her that they were going to get to announce their relationship at the race and go public, but you can tell that they've clearly been together for a while and that this is a source of contention for them. It's especially hurtful in light of him having recently said that he doesn't want to be a B-list soup, which she took to be very personal because he was essentially referring to people like her and saying he didn't want to be in a group with people like her. So we see that she is going to go ahead and inject it. And after we see Homelander and Butcher staring each other down in the mass of the race audience, we also see that the guys have caught up with Mother's Milk and are watching Popclaw do drugs and really just exercise on drugs from outside in the van. So there's no telling exactly how long she's been on the drugs, but Mother's Milk more or less explains that she's just been lifting weights, working out for a while as she's been on these. So we see her lifting a crazy amount of weight and everything, and we actually get to see her claws pop out, and that she also answers the door to see her landlord, who she encountered earlier in the episode coming in when he asked for the rent money, and she told him she would get it to him later. So now that she is seeing him again at the door, and she's all doped up on Compound V, she invites him into the apartment. She's going to have revenge sex with him, more or less, to get back at A-Train for telling the public that he's single when they asked him whether or not there was a special lady in his life. And it's very much a bad decision, but she's already on drugs as well. This is not her first bad decision of the day. So she decides to have sex with the landlord and accidentally kills him while she is hopped up on Compound V. This is particularly upsetting for Huey because as they're watching her get ready to accidentally kill this man, because it was very much an accident on the AV from outside in the van, Huey knows that she's about to accidentally kill him, and Butcher stops him from going up to save the guy, and the guy's head explodes. And Butcher explains to him, you would not have been able to get there in time. That guy was already dead. There's no way you could have climbed all those floors or even taken the elevator in the 10 seconds between this starting and him actually dying. And there's no fault here. He's like, I know it feels crappy, but there was no way you could actually save him. You would have just put your life and all of ours at risk. So this is a really uncomfortable truth for Huey to swallow. And it's just an uncomfortable form of pragmatism, really. So they go ahead and decide to leverage hiding the body for her to save her reputation in exchange for info on Compound V. And Butcher explains to Huey that the only thing the superheroes care about is their reputation in Butcher's experience. So at this point, we have them in an interaction with Popclaw and saying that they will hide the body and she can tell them where A-Train is dealing this Compound V or where he's running it. And they go to start moving the body out of there. She's still hopped up on drugs and is freaking out pretty hard, but this seems like a deus ex machina for her, so she goes ahead and acquiesces. At this point, we see that the Deep and Homelander have been working together to recover the zinc trunk that Butcher et al. Dumped into the ocean with the phrase "coming for you" spray painted on the inside of the lid. We find out that Homelander can't see through zinc, and that is why Butcher chose that specific material for disposing of the body. And we know from Butcher's previous statement that he knew there was only a matter of time until they found Translucent's body because of the myriad of talents/powers that they have collectively as the Seven. So we find out that a porpoise found it and told the Deep, and Stillwell calls the person who has done this, who has killed Translucent, hacked them up into pieces, put them in the zinc box, and thrown them in the ocean. A maniac. And Homelander quickly corrects her that they're actually very smart, whoever has done this. Since they both managed to kill Translucent and temporarily hide the body until that porpoise found it. So Madeline looks pretty horrified. Homelander mostly looks pretty angry at this point, but also challenged and interested. Clearly, he does not give a crap about Translucent. He is more interested in the fact that someone has the fortitude to try to stand up against them. In a sense, it is pure hubris on the part of Homelander that is grinding his gears. And the Deep is just kind of there. He is kind of bewildered and everything, and unhappy and apprehensive, but Homelander is really the focus of this scene. And we get that he knows that they knew that they were going to be slowed down is all by being found, and that this is really not exactly a call to action, but just an announcement that you're under attack. Homelander also feels vindicated because he has been saying the entire time that something was wrong with Translucent not being around there, and that no one else was really taking it seriously. So this is a big moment for him. Alright guys, that is all I have for you today for episode 3 of The Boys. Get some. Thank you for listening to the GSMC Sci-Fi Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'd like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show, and writing a review always really helps us. Also, if you could please remember to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, I'd appreciate it. Thank you kindly, and have a good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.